Hi, Olivia.
Hi, Katie.
Here we are with a bonus episode.
Woohoo! About a book?
About a book. Woohoo! What's Her Name? A History of the World in 80 Lost Women.
Hey, who wrote that?
These two professors, a professor of women's studies and a professor of history.
And it seems like, reading it seems like they decided there was a lack of accessible yet rigorous history told through the stories and viewpoints of women in history. It's pretty cool.
That's it. Dear listener, we have written a book and we've launched the book at the Vagina Museum in London.
Still some kind of fever dream.
Absolutely. I thought at some point it would seem real. First I thought when I submitted the manuscript it would seem real. Then I thought when I held the book in my hands it would. Then I thought maybe when we launch the book it'll seem real. It still doesn't seem real. None of it.
Yeah.
At all. Maybe listening to this episode it will seem real. I don't know. After well over a decade of searching for a world history text that was neither a snooze nor a sausage fest, we decided we need to write it. It doesn't exist. It needs to exist.
And now it does.
The goal of this book was to write a really cohesive and academically rigorous history of the world with zero jargon, zero snobbery, and zero boredom, but also to tell the whole history of the world through the stories of women.
And our launch event, was very much in the same vein of unexpected, not what anyone else has ever done, and including a lot of different voices.
It's like a festival of voices. And that, I guess, was the goal. When our publicists approached us about having a book launch, immediately I thought, a history of the world in 80 lost women. As we say in the acknowledgments of the book, it's only possible because there are literally hundreds of scholars out there unearthing these stories and writing the biographies on them. So the work is being done all over the world. And that, to me, is cause for celebration. And so the book launch was a celebration where we were able to invite lots of former episode guests to join us in celebrating putting women back in our histories.
And not just by talking in other unexpected ways that we had.
Yes!
I think when you plan an event and it's surprising even to you, that's a sign that the event was amazing, because I just sat there in wonder and awe and joy at the bizarre mishmash of things that we had happening together. I've been telling people it feels like the opening of a walks into a bar joke. An Irish nun reading a poem about buying God a beer, and a PhD of art history doing a belly dance.
Yes.
And
a Mayan guide. And a Bollywood musical director.
And
singing.
A recital of medieval bills from Westminster Abbey that somehow turned into the greatest slam poem ever created.
Wonderful.
It was astonishing and joyous.
It was a magical night. Because inspired by that event, the library event that we went to at Bridget 1500, when we went with the group, it was just so unforgettably wholesome. It was like a wholesomeness explosion. I wanted to recreate that for our book launch. So thank you again, Bridget 1500. And the people of Kildare for the inspiration.
And thank you all our former guests so willingly.
Yes, for being game for such a thing.
And flying halfway around the world.
In order for each guest to take the stage for 3-4 minutes. Read a poem, sing a song, do a dance, tell a story. And boy, did the What's Her Name crowd come through. I wish we could include the dance numbers.
Yes, as our former guest Aaron Patterson once said, there is certainly not enough dance in podcasting.
Amen. Amen.
But we still haven't figured it out, so.
I want to thank everybody who came, and boy, did London turn out. I remember when we arrived to set up, and they said, oh no, we've sold way too many tickets. We literally don't have enough chairs.
We've by 50%. What are we going to do?
And then to sell out of the books during the signing afterwards. Like I said, Probably none of it was real. And maybe, I don't know, dear listeners, if you're in the UK, you might be able to find the book and discover if it is real. Let us know if it is real. Again, it comes out in Australia in July, and in the US, we poor peasants in the US, we have to wait until December for the book to come out. But also, the audiobook is coming out in August, read by my literal all-time favorite audiobook reader. I have to pinch myself to say that this is real. Caroline Lennon, my favorite reader of all time, in her Irish accent to add to the international mix. She is reading the audiobook. So, without further ado, we invite you to sit back and enjoy this audio recording of a night of celebration, putting women back in our histories. Is this thing on? Check, 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 check. Welcome, and thank you for coming. This is amazing. Thank you for turning up, London. Absolutely incredible. I guess we better say I'm Katie Nelson.
And I'm Olivia Mickle.
And this is What'sHerName. We want to thank you so much for coming out tonight. We have such a great packed program of festivities and special guests, and so let's just get started right away celebrating the fact that women's history is being done everywhere. That's the only reason a book like ours can even exist.
Yeah. All the work that everyone else has done, and then we swoop in.
Put it all together. So tonight what we have for you is a night of special guests joining us from all over the world to celebrate in little 4-minute chunks all kinds of women from across time and across the world as we kind of move our way through time via this book chapter by chapter. So without further ado, we would like to introduce our editor for the book, who has been there with us to wrap up this whole gnarly project. Gabriella, oh my gosh, I don't know how to pronounce your last name because we never met until just now. We've sent a bazillion emails, and this is us meeting in person for the first time. Thank you, Gabby.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me all right? Hello everyone, my name's Gabby. I'm senior editor at Michael O'Mara Books, and I had the pleasure of working with Katie and Olivia on What's Her Name. Thank you for asking me to say a few words today. I was also invited to do an interpretive dance, but I might see how this goes first. What I love about this book is how refreshing it is, not only in its style, but its content too. It shines a light on all those forgotten women in history and explains why we don't know about them, and helps us understand why it's still happening today. The stories span the globe, revealing just how important women have been everywhere and in all areas of life, from music to war, drawing connections to those countries and periods in time, deepening our understanding of the way the world has worked. I loved the book as soon as I read the manuscript. I have a history degree, but I learned so much. How did I not know about this woman? I kept saying. I also laughed out loud as these two have a wicked sense of humour. I've been asked to say a little bit about the process of putting the book together. I read the manuscript, Olivia, Katie and I chatted on Teams. The text was in very good shape, but as is to be expected in the editing process, there were a few rounds of going back and forth with the authors, refining the text. All the time I was conscious that I wanted to keep the lively, chatty style of the authors from the podcast, while also ensuring that the book was well structured and a serious history book. I then turned to finding images for the book. I wanted to pack in as many as possible, but that was a challenge because these are lost women. If people, men, didn't choose to write about women in history, they also didn't bother to make pictures of them. If I couldn't find an image, I got around it by using maps and posters, for example. And the authors, who were sisters, in case you didn't know, said they had another sister, Mera, how many of you are there, who is an artist and was able to provide her artist's impressions of some of the women. Next, everything was laid out as it would be in the finished book, in a stage known as the proofs. The proofs are then checked a number of times by me, the authors, and a proofreader. The cover was also created during this process. I provided the text and all the other information that appears on the cover. The incredible cover illustrator Ellen Winata created the artwork, and our in-house designer put it all together with spot UV finishes. It really is a team effort putting a book together. Katie and Olivia, I love your dynamism, energy and personality, which really come through in What's Her Name. It shows how history doesn't have to be stale, pale and male. Thank you for sharing these stories and for putting these women back in history. I'll now read a short excerpt from the book. How did we get here? Well, here we are, all 8 billion of us, showing some deeply impressive teamwork. We cave-dwelling Homo sapiens now inhabit the whole of planet Earth. We've explored the ocean depths, we've flung ourselves into space, and we've figured out some pretty big stuff along the way. Yet for all our years here, we've also just been doing the same things over and over. And here's the twist. Doing the same things over and over is how we figured out the really big stuff. Our story, our collective human saga, may just be the most interesting thing this universe has ever seen. For 300,000 years, a lot of little conscious beings bustling around on planet Earth, just as stupid and just as wonderful as you and me, were doing their best with what they had, and with what they knew, which most of the time was not much at all. Now that's an interesting story. But here's another twist. The story that's been told to us is not interesting at all. World history, capital W, capital H, is overwhelming, confusing, and worst of all, boring. There are probably lots of reasons for this, and we all know our teachers were humans doing their best with what they had. The thing is, what they had was a sad sack of stories strung together by the man, about the man, and the message was, revere the man and his exploits. That made world history not only intimidating, but depressing. This forgettable factoid I memorised for the exam is important because why exactly? The root of the problem is our saga has been missing about half the characters. And if half the characters are missing, it takes some serious mental gymnastics to force a compelling, let alone sensical plotline. The most amazing lives with the most shocking plot twists, despairing losses and world-changing triumphs got left out. These are some of the most iconic lives in human history. We are convinced you will believe it. All we have it to do is tell you their stories. So here we are. Here we are to tell a new human saga. Not the whole human saga, no one can do that, but ours is a sweeping global story of humanity from the very beginning, woven through the lives of women that history left out. Like the rest of us mortals, they aren't perfect. Their stories can be pretty gnarly, actually, and deeply inspiring and delightfully absurd and horrifying and achingly beautiful, because those words, it turns out, perfectly describe the whole human story. Let's begin. Humans/history. Not perfect, pretty gnarly actually, deeply inspiring, delightfully absurd, horrifying, achingly beautiful. I had the pleasure of working with poet Nikita Gill a few years ago, whose own life story is fascinating, and I'd like to end on a quote of Nikita's that I think is apt. Fill your life with women that empower you, that help you believe in your magic, and aid them to believe in their own exceptional power and their incredible magic too. Women that believe in each other can survive anything. Women who believe in each other create armies that will win kingdoms and wars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabby. And I know that there are other members of the Michael O'Mara team here tonight. If any of you are here, would you just please stand up so we can just give you all a big thank you? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for publishing a book like this. Like what? I don't know. Let's start with chapter 1, shall we?
In the beginning, there were lots of naked ladies. Say you were a Stone Age Homo sapiens who just discovered that you can change a lump of sandstone into any shape you want. Any shape at all. What would you make? Keep in mind, it's going to take you many, many hours, so it's got to be something you like enough to carry on. There are endless possibilities here. And that's what makes these Stone Age archaeological finds so strange. Pretty much all of the Stone Age art finds are the same weird abstraction of a naked woman. The Venus of Willendorf is the most iconic, but she's one of a zillion. All these little stone figures have no face, giant boobs and bellies, little toothpick arms, and stump legs. They've been found all across Eurasia. How many male figurines are there? None! Not a one over thousands of years. Why? Nobody knows! This question and answer make a beautiful recurring refrain in ancient history. Why? Nobody knows. Why all the statues of naked ladies? No one knows. They're typically called Venus figurines because academics made this simple calculation. Ginormous reproductive organs plus figurine equals fertility totem. Mystical religious explanations are almost always the default explanation. But when we asked you what shape you would have made from stone, was your first idea something religious? Or did you think of something funny? Maybe something useful? Were you going to make a tool or a decoration or a reminder of your lost love? A little stone pie, anyone? Cute little doll that looks like your grandma? These are all possible explanations for the likes of the Venus of Willendorf. There's one more glaring interpretation. You probably already thought of it. Ancient porn. What if, when humans first discovered that they could make shapes out of stone, they said, I'm making boobs! Little naked ladies I can carry in my pocket. It's definitely possible. We can't prove any one theory. We can tell that these figures are a huge clue about our own origins, about what it means to be human. We just can't figure out what the clue actually is. So the Venus of Willendorf turns out to be kind of a personality test. For now, all of our oldest three-dimensional art is faceless boobs on footless legs. What do you think that says about humans? Moving forward to only 15,000 years ago, I'm going to take you halfway between Cancun and Tulum. There's a cenote, aka a natural sinkhole, on private property that drops away into an underwater cave system stretching hundreds of miles. In 2007, some intrepid cave divers stocked up with 2 tanks of air each, plus a little underwater turbine to jet them through the water, in order to explore as far as they could before having to resurface. They rocketed along for hours when the tunnel they were exploring suddenly dropped away, and they found themselves floating in a completely black abyss. With no bottom to reflect from, their underwater flashlights disappeared into the darkness below. Not all of us would have plunged headfirst into the void, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? They dropped 100 feet into the abyss before their flashlights started to pick up the cave floor again. It was covered in gigantic prehistoric animal bones, a mammoth skull, a massive thigh bone snapped in two, the skull of a cave bear, giant sloths, saber-toothed tiger fangs, the stuff of fantasy. This was the cache of all caches. But just before their air alarms sent them back the way they'd come, they decided to push a bit further. And there it was, a human skull, perched on a rise above the cave floor, as if greeting the divers. Oh, hey there. Oh, hey, Naia. How've you been? Not so good, it turns out. Naia's skeleton is the oldest complete skeleton ever found in the Americas, and her bones reveal that in the beginning, life in the Americas was pretty bleak. What Naia's bones tell us about her life. 1, she was 15 or 16 years old when she died. 2, her DNA tells us that she was new to the area and related to the people of Beringia, that piece of land that connected Russia to Alaska. 3, which may be why she'd had regular periods of starvation. Her people probably didn't yet know what to eat here or how to catch it. 4, she was moving pretty much all the time, carrying heavy bags slung over her back. She had strong legs. Her left arm was healed poorly from a spiral fracture. The only way you get a fracture like that is when it's inflicted by another person. The segments of her sacrum indicate that she once became pregnant before her body was actually able to carry a child.
Oof. Her pelvis was broken massively, indicating a fall from a great height, a fatal kind of fall. We visited this cenote on a What'sHerName tour, and attending the tour was one chemist named KIRK Stapleey, chemist by day, poet by night, who was inspired in that very moment at the cave to write a poem, and KIRK Stapleey is joining us vicariously.
Hello, everybody. My name is KIRK Stapleey. I'm really grateful to be asked to help celebrate Olivia and Katie as they're publishing their book. I'm so grateful for the opportunity that they provided for me to be able to learn the story of Naia, which is the title of the poem that I'm going to read to you now. Hopefully you've listened to the podcast and know the story. And if not, well, this poem will make a lot more sense if you do. So here is my poem by me, KIRK Stapleey, and it is entitled Naia. Alone, looking. My light went out. At the corner of my eyes, I saw only darkness, unseen rustling, whispers, spirits. Alone, I ran. I fell so far onto broken bones. My body, also broken, kept me company with pain, until at last I feel numb, alone as before. Alone, my fear ebbs, and a white mist grows at the corner of my eyes. Once again I see my mother's kind gaze, my father's strong glance, my people's regard. Alone we traveled so far. I know they looked, but I must meet my rest here, alone, in the dark. Alone, the unseen bones around me wake and stir. At the corner of my eyes, the mist grows brighter. The spirits rise, not alone, no. These fallen, these left behind bones, they will walk with me as friends. They have come for me, so I will not be alone. Thank you.
First civilizations. Humans build cities. Weirdly, men are in charge. Curiouser and Curiouser, the Oracle of Delphi. An amazing archaeological site in Greece preserves another ancient relic of early religious belief. It too revolves around a woman believed to be wiser than them all. Turns out, if there was one thing ancient Eurasia could agree on, it was that the advice of an old lady on a three-legged stool at the top of Mount Parnassus was the most valuable info in the world. The year is anywhere from 800 BCE to 400 CE. Kings, emperors, and other powerful men all across the ancient world are making the arduous, sometimes months-long trek just to ask an elderly Greek peasant woman a single question. Why? Because she is the Pythia, and she alone can see their future, direct their destiny, and channel the voice of God. This is huge. This means that for over 1,000 years, the most powerful person on Earth was a random elderly peasant woman and her centuries of successors, sequestered for life on a remote mountainside. The Pythia's answers to the era's biggest questions will shape the course of human history. The word of the Pythia would alter the face and the fate of the world. Ancient Greece is also the source of the world's oldest written song, a man named Seikolos' Epitaph for his wife, here performed by our brother, Sam Henderson.
Our songs is funny, meron olos ulibu, prosolidon estitosen, totelos o chronos apaiten.
Chapter 3, Ancient Empires, Keeping Up with the Romeses. Representing Chapter 3, coming to us from Ireland, is Abridging Sister Rita Minahan to tell us about one of the most beloved characters in Irish history, Saint Bridget.
Greetings to you all. My name is Rita Minahan. I'm a Brigidine sister coming to you from Sulisfrida, Kildare, the heartland of St. Bridget. St. Bridget established a double monastery for women and men in Kildare towards the end of the 5th century. Today, we are witnessing a huge resurgence of interest in this extraordinary woman. Last year, the Irish government took a decision to honour St. Bridget with a new national holiday. It marks the equal dignity of male and female at national level. She now stands shoulder to shoulder with St. Patrick. She is remembered as a powerful female spiritual leader, a woman of the land, an advocate of the poor, renowned as a peacemaker. She is remembered above all as a woman of legendary hospitality. I will conclude with a poem attributed to St. Bridget, its translation by Brendan Kennelly of a very old Irish poem. Scholars tell us it is much later than Bridget's time. However, we will give the credit to Bridget on this occasion. Her celebration of the ordinary and her vision of heaven are reflected in this soliloquy. St. Bridget's Ale Soliloquy. I'd like to give a lake of beer to God. I'd love the heavenly host to be tippling there for all eternity. I'd love the men of heaven to live and dance with me. If they wanted, I'd put at their disposal vats of suffering. White cups of love I'd give them with a heart and a half. Sweet pictures of mercy I'd offer to every man. I'd make heaven a cheerful spot because the happy heart is true. I'd make the men happy for their own sakes. I'd like Jesus to be there too. I'd gather the people together from all the parishes around. I'd give a special welcome to the women, the 3 Marys of great renown. I'd sit with the men, the women and God, there by the lake of beer, and we'd be drinking good health forever. And every drop would be a prayer. Enjoy the celebration. Thank you.
Bless her. Yeah. Bet you didn't know that a saint wrote a poem about a lake of beer to be sitting there drinking with God and Jesus.
That was read to you by a nun at the Vagina Museum.
It's a new world. Chapter 4, the Middle Ages. Nothing can stop Asia's domination except one little bacterium. Representing the Middle Ages, we have the story of Gudit. Let's look back to East Africa to see what the Middle Ages are serving up. When we last left Meroe, it had been conquered by its hardcore patriarchal neighbor, Axum, eventually claiming all the Horn of Africa, what's now Eritrea, and northern Ethiopia. Its capital was a spectacle of monumental building. Huge stone obelisks, some more than 100 feet high, were the largest structures in the world hewn from a single rock. Accruing massive wealth and power through global trade, Axum then did exactly what you'd expect. Became obsessed with bureaucratic record keeping, taxes, and telling women to go home. But Gudit decided to go big instead. There are lots of versions of her story, recorded in the oral histories of different communities from Axum and beyond. Some even say she's Judith from the Bible, but that's a stretch. Our main written source is the Chronicle of Ethiopia, a medieval history that was written centuries after she was gone, but tales of her violence are still part of the folklore of Ethiopia. She was, they say, born into the royal family of Axum. Because of intrigue at the palace, use your imagination, she was banished and forced to become a prostitute. Making the best of it, she quickly targeted a Catholic deacon, became his mistress, and got him wrapped around her finger. He gifted her gold shoes, they say, made from the curtains of the Holy Church. When the people heard about it, they tracked down Gudit and cut off her right breast, as you do. She ran to the Red Sea, where she could go no further. Another familiar motif, where's Moses when you need him? No deliverance came from Yahweh, but Zenobis, a real-life Syrian prince, came to her rescue. After trauma bonding, the two joined forces and converted to Judaism together. Normally, when you maim a prostitute and banish her to the wilderness, she does not return as a warrior princess at the head of an unstoppable army. So the Axumite army was not prepared. In the year 970, the king of Axum wrote frantically to neighboring kingdoms, "Help! Axum has been conquered by a woman and she's burning all the churches." And those extant letters are actually some of our best corroborating evidence that the stories about Gudit are true. They say she ruled Axum for 40 years, another biblical motif, what do you know? In the stories, Gudit is given the name Estato, which means fire. Some churches today still bear the black marks from the flames of her rage. Ousting Christianity, she established a new religion that was a hybrid of Judaism and indigenous beliefs, and it's during her reign that Axum collapsed. Gudit is often blamed for triggering what's known as the Ethiopian Dark Ages, and you could see it that way. All the wealth, bureaucracy, and massive phallic obelisk erections came to an end. But it wasn't because she mishandled her power. She ended Axum very intentionally. Her new kingdom would last for many generations, but that's for another chapter.
Chapter 5, The New World. America enters the chat. Absolutely everything goes bananas. 1511 CE, Playa del Carmen, Mexico. On the shores of Shamanha, the Maya were celebrating a holiday. when the gods suddenly delivered an unexpected gift. Through the pounding waves scrambled a dozen or so hairy, weirdly pale forms, clinging to bits of flotsam. The creatures seemed to be attempting to speak, mumbling nonsense. Spoilers, it's Spanish. Like, Todo del Oro and La Catástrofe. You can't tell it's Spanish when I say it. Tormenta, Todo el Oro. Nobody had ever seen creatures like this before. It must be a gift from the gods. Prepare the sacrifice! But the moment before death, two of the strange, pale creatures began to frantically show off their skills. Geronimo Aguilar, a Catholic priest, somehow conveyed that he was a holy man, and the Maya set him aside. Gonzalo Guerrero's task was harder. He first needed a knife and some wood, and some catgut, ideally. La música, he kept saying. The Maya watched with wary curiosity, but as he strummed the first guitar America had ever seen, they decided this guy might be worth keeping around. It didn't take long before he caught the eye of Chief Nanshan Khan's daughter, 16-year-old Zazil Ha. The interest was entirely mutual, but this pairing was shocking to the Maya on several levels. First, they were still not certain Guerrero was totally human. Second, and perhaps more importantly, he had this strange and terrible habit of listening to what Zazil Ha had to say. He treated her as his equal instead of like the silent servant woman that women were meant to be. Rumor had it, he even believed that women should be allowed to speak to men in public. Zazil Ha believed him to be human. Guerrero believed she should speak and be heard. It was a meeting of open minds.
Hi everyone, this is Gabriel Quemé from the Yucatan Peninsula. We just finished diving in this beautiful cave cenote. This is one of the places where I like to think where Zazil Ha lived. We are in the Riviera Maya, Mexico. If you don't know who Zazil Ha is, well, we know her here in Yucatan since 500 years ago as the one who saved thousands of lives of men, women, and children. As you know, back in the time, women had not the right to speak. But these brave women, by her actions, by daring to speak, by not only translating, but really trying to say what her husband means, and by those actions, she saved thousands and thousands of lives. Zazil Ha is known also with Gonzalo Guerrero as the parents of our race, of the race mestizos. There is a mix of the European with the Mayas, which was mixed with Gonzalo Guerrero, Zazil Ha, and then we were born. I believe that she deserved to be more remembered. I think we should investigate a little bit more and bring her out so that people can know her history, as for us is a true hero. I would like to congratulate Olivia and Katie for their new book, and I would like to thank them for making me part of this. Thank you so much. And as we say in Maya, yung butiki.
Chapter 6, Land Grabs and Enlightenment. The world plays an epic game of risk and solves everything. If you are convinced that you have it better than your neighbor, taking over their life is probably what's best for everyone. This is the general worldview during the 17th and 18th centuries. Empire is back in style. What's fascinating is that it occurred simultaneously with an intellectual movement, the scientific revolution and enlightenment. Humanity set out on an inspiring collective quest to find, perchance to build, the answers to life, the universe, and everything for the benefit of all.
Thank you so much. Witness my hand this 27th day of November 1710, Elizabeth Gregory. Is how Gregory, the head carpenter of Westminster Abbey, signs off a letter regarding a query of £30 against the commission of the great model of the Abbey that we encountered on the podcast, and some of us encountered very briefly yesterday. Tonight, I want to share more of her hand and to give Elizabeth's voice back to her and to sort of round out her story just by giving us tiny glimpses into her life at the Abbey and how she spent her time there. Around the time of the Model Commission, Gregory also took on extensive repairs at a house at the Abbey after the death of a priest, and this caused her a rather large problem. Petition. To the Right Reverend Father in God Francis, Lord Bishop of Rochester, Dean of the Collegiate Church of St. Peter's, Westminster, and to the Reverend Chapter of the same church, the humble petition of Elizabeth Gregory, widow must be some sort of Georgian term for head carpenter, I'm trying to figure that out, Edward Tufnell, mason, and John Hester, bricklayer, showeth that your petitioner, Elizabeth Gregory, was employed to do the work at the house that the late Reverend Dr. Birch lived in the Little Cloister. That the work amounted to the sum of £100, that's around £20,000 today, and upwards thereof, where the sum remains unpaid of £70. That the loss of this sum is a great hardship to your petitioners, if not considered by your lordship and the Reverend Chapter. Your petitioners therefore most humbly pray your lordship and the Reverend Chapter to take their hard cases into consideration and grant them such relief as you shall seem meet, and your petitioners shall ever pray, etc. This petition was likely sent in 1713 after the installation of the new Dean, Francis Atterbury, hoping perhaps for more compassionate eyes. We might assume that the petition was settled because 5 years later, Gregory was very busy at the Abbey, as evidenced in the following excerpts from her bills that she'd sent to the under-surveyor, and I've edited them to sort of pick out the key pieces that sort of bring me joy. And to me, they feel like a poem, so I'm just going to read through them fairly quickly. To Elizabeth Gregory, widow, for work done by her at the deanery from Michaelmas 1718 to Michaelmas 1719. About taking down of the roof of the old wash house in College Kitchen Garden and making a scaffold to the outside and the inside of the kitchen for the bricklayer, and fitting up the drying horse and putting in lines and making a standing drying horse, about mending the library floor, about cutting of 2 doorways and fixing up of 2 doorposts, and pulling down a partition and a pair of stairs by my lord's bedchamber, and making a new pair, about fixing a board for the gardener to wheel the barrow up and down, and making a standing ladder for Mr. South, moving of 2 great chests, one into the Jerusalem chamber and the other into the dark vestry in the Abbey, and putting up shelves in the pantry, and mending the benches in the college hall, making a door case and a door at the waterhead in St. James's Park, about fixing a post in the deanery stable and mending the floor in the hayloft and mending the stable and the coachhouse doors, hanging and fixing of pictures, altering of Mrs. Atterbury's table and making a form with 2 oak logs to stand in the horse pond to clean it, and fixing up some pieces of the roof to hang the great lantern over the great stairs, making and mending of boxes to go to Bromley, and making a gutter over my lord's bedchamber, etc. 2 months after these bills are dated, Gregory was buried with her husband on the 10th of December 1719 at the age of 55 in the Abbey cloisters.
This is a love poem written by a 16th century traveling itinerant poet turned Persian queen.
تلهم روشی Hi, I'm Walid Ziad, and thank you for this opportunity. Over the last decade, I've been tracing the sacred lineage of this absolutely phenomenal, larger-than-life 18th century female Sufi scholar saint of Kabul, known as Bibi Sahiba the Great, who will be the chief protagonist of my next book. Among her most fascinating successors is one Dadi Mikta, her name literally means sweet, who passed away in 1916. And she was this towering personality who lived on the edge of the Great Thar Desert, which is now in southeast Pakistan, near the Indian border. Even today, she has hundreds of thousands of devotees, all the way to Rajasthan, both Muslim and Hindu. What you see behind is the upper half of her magnificent vast desert shrine. Now here's the backstory. Bibi Sahiba's grandson, who was a famous Afghan mystic and freedom fighter, had actually met Dadi Mikta on one of his journeys, was incredibly impressed by her, and he appointed her as his spiritual deputee to take spiritual charge of the desert. It was a strange choice. Dadi Mikta was very humble. She was a fakir. She lived in a thatched hut. But she was also visited by all of the top male scholars of the region who would gather under her tree. She was famous not only for her erudition, her wisdom, and her healing abilities, but also for negotiating disputes and protecting peasant rights. I'll share a quick story. In Balar, in the Great Thar Desert, there were dozens of villages who were Dadi Mikta's disciples. In one of these villages, there was a man called Babudan who declares himself landlord, and he started extracting money from the peasants and harassed them regularly with his armed guards. So a delegation of tribes traveled over 100 miles to meet Dadi Mikta, and they asked that she intervene. She agreed. And she went with a force of 250 men and women to mediate. And she met this rather villainous character, but then he refused to budge, and he threatened to move even further. So, at that point, she organized a defense force of 12 men and systematically planned an attack on Babudan's armed guards. They were successful. And eventually they took Babudan and they hung him upside down. And apparently this was so humiliating for him that he went back to Dadi Mikta and swore never to extort money from the poor again. Now, this is rather incredible because this is one of several stories of a traditional Muslim Orthodox woman in the 19th century in the poorest part of South Asia, who in fact negotiates on behalf of the poor and assembles a vigilante force of disciples to protect their rights. Dadi Mikta herself had several deputees who were incredible women in their own right with their own spiritual following. One of them was a Dadi Saliha of the Mangrio clan, descended from this legendary fire king, who, along with her brother, set up a madrasa in the late 19th century. It's said that when the two of them, Dadi Saliha and Dadi Mikta, met, they could bend space and time. In fact, I have a fascinating first-hand account of a young boy who would accompany them. Another disciple was Daddy Kandel Halipoto, who dressed in men's clothes and performed impossible 40-day seclusions and fasts, and in fact refused to get married. Daddy Mitta is one of about 15 or 20 great scholar saints in this particular Afghan Sufi lineage that I write on in my forthcoming book, which is tentatively titled Sufi Saints of the Afghan Empire, Bibi Sahiba and Her Spiritual Networks. Thank you.
Chapter 7. Oh, no. Yeah, chapter 7. Yeah. Liberty enlightening the people, or maybe not. The world grabs liberty and runs in every possible direction.
Hello, Katie and Olivia. This is Ian Mortimer here, speaking to you from darkest Dartmoor in Devon. There are so many people in history who deserve to be celebrated. And when I'm talking about the ways people misjudge the past, I often use the metaphor of lenses or spectacles. If you look at something with blue tinted spectacles, frequently you will only see things that are blue. You will miss the reds, you will miss all the other shades, they'll just fade away. You will look only at the blue. So if we look at the past through male tinted spectacles, we will only see really what men have done and what men have thought. And we're missing the bigger picture. We may think we're seeing everything, but we're not. With the person I talked about for what's her name, Harriet Mellon, who was in the early 19th century, the biggest rags to riches story there is. You know, you've got to have the general spectacles on, that all points of view, to realise that she faced a lot of problems in her life, being the illegitimate daughter of an Irish immigrant peasant woman who looked after clothes for a travelling troupe of theatre performers. But she also faced problems from aristocratic women who wanted to hold her back as she rose up the social ranks. This is important. If you've only got those male spectacles on, you'll misunderstand her life and what she had to deal with, and how she was a remarkable woman for triumphing over all her adversities. And yes, it's that agency I think we really need to bring out. And I think that epitomises what a glorious history you can tell when you start taking off the male spectacles and looking at the world in all its technicolor detail. In fact, history wouldn't be half so good without the women.
Tripping over my own dress. Chapter 8. The Global American Saga. By hook or by crook, the whole world piles into America. What would it have been like to live in the sweet land of liberty in the 1800s? Well, first and foremost, you would have had a global experience like no humans ever before. Dreamers and desperados piled in, outlaws and outcasts, snake oil salesmen and slaves. From all over the world, some people moved mountains to get to America, while others got swallowed up by it, despite desperate resistance. 19th century America was a spectacle, an unprecedented phenomenon, a spring zephyr where the wildest dreams could take flight, and a caustic pit where dreams died. It was a microcosm of the world at large. Liberty, yes, but what kind and at what price?
Standing at 12,500 feet, Mount Florence in Yosemite, California, is the first and remains to be one of very few peaks named for a woman. And it was named for a 17-year-old girl, Florence Hutchings, who was born in Yosemite Valley in 1864. And they named it for her because she failed to do anything but be herself. John Muir called her his squirrel, his untamed one. And he says that she was a black-eyed witch of a girl, a Topsy that could scarce be overdrawn, and a rare creature. So I wrote this for her.
Out up in the valley of Yosemite ran a raven-haired girl who climbed cedar trees, chased lizards, rode bareback, little witch of a girl. Ma named her Florence, but we called her Squirrel. Born at the base of Yosemite Falls, she couldn't deny the high country call. Since she had opened her eyes of black, Flo dreamed of climbing Half Dome's back. Welcome to all who seek to find their hearts in these granite peaks and below the river, quiet, serene. It's the rocks and the falls that make it sing. They once tried to send her to school far away. No walls could contain her, no rules make her stay. When at last she returned to her Awani, she started to climb and found others to lead. Welcome to all who seek to find their hearts in our granite peaks and below the river, quiet, serene. It's the rocks and the falls that make it sing. And Floyd taught us all to see that the rivers don't flow, they sing. And the wind doesn't blow, it breathes. As she prayed to the wild, let us all be free. Too soon to lose her, only 17. Yesterday climbing rocks and ravines. The stone stands above her bones, but to find her spirit you must go to the high Sierra, 12,000 feet. They named it Mount Florence so she could be free. And Floyd taught us all to see that the rivers don't flow, they sing. And the wind doesn't blow, it breathes. So look up at her mountain, let us all be free.
Thank you, Jessica. Her master's thesis is an album of songs about women from history. Chapter 9, Down with the Man. If you could just point him out for me. Post-war disillusionment. War plus pandemic equals disillusionment. It's one of the persistent patterns in history. And if the pandemic is big enough, you don't even need a war. So, thanks to a boost from the global flu pandemic, a radical new global youth culture began tearing down all established truths in 1919. It was called Dada and avant-garde and jazz and the Roaring Twenties and Prohibition and the Mad Decade and the Lost Generation and the Progressive Era and so much more. Collectively, the world's next generation essentially all agreed that the only thing we know for sure is our parents were wrong.
I want to dance human characters. The characters in society that the bourgeois tried to ignore. The underdogs of society. The people in the streets, in the alleys, in the back rooms of the clubs. The exploited. Yes, it always came down to them.
Janet's dance was inspired, of course, by the avant-garde dancer Valeska Gert, the constant scandal, out to shock everyone who watched her. It was her favorite thing.
Hello! Congratulations on the publication of What's Her Name? A History of the World in 80 Lost Women. Fabulous topic, fabulous book. And I'm here to share with you today a snippet from my book, One Last Shot, about a forgotten woman from history. And I'll just read a few poems. This is a novel in verse about Gerda Taro. I'll start with date night. One Friday night, after a particularly tough week, we make the choice between dinner or wine and bring the bottle and a baguette back to the room, where we sit on the bed by candlelight, sharing sips between kisses and laughter and ideas for the future, each one bigger than the next. Inspired idea. Andre suggests sending me around the city as his ambassador. If anyone can get my work published, it's you, boss. I'm laughing so hard I'm crying. Droplets of wine dribbling down the bottle, down my chin, and he kisses them away, drinking from my skin, until a new idea strikes my brain like a match, flaming to life with sudden ferocity. What if I act as the ambassador for someone else, someone famous, someone used to getting paid handsomely for his work? Suddenly, we're not laughing anymore. We both sit up straighter. Andre sets the bottle of wine on the ground, and I continue painting the picture of this mysterious photographer whose work I represent. We'll come up with a name for him, and nothing like our Polish or Hungarian names, but something that sounds flashier, something you'd hear in Hollywood, something American. Brainstorming. We get out a notebook, take turns scribbling ideas, and eventually come up with new names for the both of us. Robert Capa and Gerda Taro. Both without a clear origin, though clearly not Jewish, and both with plenty of star quality, perfect for the pair we aim to become. And like that, our transformation is complete. So that is Gerda Taro in One Last Shot. And congratulations again. I hope you all enjoy the wonderful celebration.
That seemed dramatic. Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Olivia and Katie, for inviting me this evening to talk to you. I'm Nikki Druce, the host of Macabre London Podcast. Thank you very much. That's a nice... Thanks, Mum. And tonight I'm going to be introducing you to Helen Duncan. Helen was best known as the last person to be imprisoned under the Witchcraft Act of 1735 during the Second World War for fraudulent claims which got her in trouble for leaking military secrets. Here's an eyewitness account from perhaps her most famous séance she ever held, the one which led to her arrest. Mrs. Duncan, I am going to be doing accents for this, so I'm really sorry for that. I hope you're ready. I will get the microphone ready. Okay. Oh, we've already done that bit. Mrs. Duncan settled down, leant back, and appeared to go into a trance. Mrs. Homer drew the curtains, and it was very dark indeed. From Mrs. Duncan, a voice suddenly spoke and said, "How do you do?" Everybody looked towards the cabinet and they saw a white form which seemed to appear between the curtains. A rather traditional ghost, but Mrs. Homer explained to the audience that this was Albert, Mrs. Duncan's spirit guide. The voice said that it was pleased to see so many familiar faces amongst the audience. And then the so-called spirit retired back into the cabinet. Then the more serious business of the day was started. Albert said, "I have here a lady who passed away with some trouble to her bowels. Will someone please claim this lady?" And nobody said anything. Then the voice said, "It is for the gentleman on Mr. Hormer's right." That ought to be the surgeon lieutenant, but it was not. It was Mr. Worth instead, and Mrs. Homer leant forward and told Mr. Worth to ask the spirit out. Worth said, "Come out, please." And eventually a white draped figure appeared between the curtains, and the poor man could not think of what on earth to say. So he said, "Are you my aunt?" And the figure replied in a husky voice, "Yes." That was most disconcerting because all his aunts are living. So what on earth his aunt was doing, masquerading as a spirit with trouble in her bowels, appearing in a white sheet, heaven only knows. Something had evidently gone wrong. Then the voice said to the same gentleman, "I have a man who passed away with some trouble to his chest." Worth again said, "Come out, please." A figure appeared between the curtains, and he said, "Are you my uncle?" To the surprise of Mr. Worth, the figure said, "Yes," saluted, and disappeared into the curtains again. He sat down, but that was not the end. A third shot took place for the same gentleman again. Up stood Mr. Worth and said, "Is it for me?" Albert said, "I have here your sister." Worth said, "There must be some mistake because I have only one sister and she is alive." But the spirit was able to cope with this difficulty, for the voice said, "You may not understand, but she was a premature child. You say you think you have only one sister living, but in fact there was some embryonic infant that your mother had, and it is in that little creature." Mr. Worth replied, "I'm certain that there were no premature children in our family." The voice said, "You can ask a question." But he didn't. He sat down. And that's what I'm going to do now. Thank you very much, everybody.
Hi, my name is Neela Pekarik. I am a musician and a Rattlesnake Kate enthusiast. Rattlesnake Kate was a woman who lived out in the plains of Colorado around the early 1900s, and in 1925 became notorious for this very strange encounter with a rattlesnake migration. She was out on horseback with her 3-year-old son and hopped off the horse to open a gate and found herself in the midst of over 100 rattlesnakes and walked away unscathed by killing these snakes and collected the skins of these snakes and fashioned herself a flapper-style gown, as you do. And this gown has been preserved in the Greeley Museum, and that's where I stumbled upon this story as a college student. And being born and raised in Colorado, I just thought, why isn't everyone talking about this? Why have I never heard of this? And naturally became pretty obsessed with this snake lady. And what I found was just incredibly compelling storytelling about a woman who was unwilling to compromise who she was for anybody. And I wrote a whole bunch of songs about her. And so I want to thank What's Her Name podcast and congratulate you on your release of your amazing book and for keeping the stories alive of these women that were so remarkable and otherwise may not have their stories told. So thank you for including Rattlesnake Kate amongst these women. And I'd love to share a song about that unwillingness to compromise who she was for anybody. This is a song that was written for my musical about Rattlesnake Kate. It's called I Want Everything.
All I want is to meet my match. You'll love me 'cause I'm funny. You'll love me 'cause I'm free. And I'll laugh the loudest at your jokes. I'll be the cleverest in hopes. You're forever lassoed by my ropes. Part ways for a bit, jump brooks for a bit, trot home separate and get right together. All I want is everything. around freely, be taken seriously, and take what I need. Will the world be washed away if we don't aim to please? If we mean what we say, I'll take what I want, I'll say what I want, won't be nonchalant and still be a charmer. And I want is everything, everything. I'll stand my ground and make lots of sound in my own way. I want everything, 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 everything.
Chapter 10, we've reached the final chapter, the atomic age. Is this the end? The whole world takes stock.
Hello from Haarlem, the Netherlands. My name is Sophie Poldermans, and I'm the author of Seducing and Killing Nazis. I'm a huge fan of Olivia and Katie's work, and I'm thrilled to be here virtually. Today, I would like to shed light on 3 young Dutch women, Hannie Schaft and the sisters Truus and Freddy Overstegen. Hannie was 19, Truus 16, and Freddy 14 years old when Nazi Germany occupied the Netherlands in 1940. And these young girls were brave enough to resist. They started out small. They would print and distribute illegal newspapers. They would forge identification papers, but they wanted to do more, if necessary, with weapons. So they met in the summer of 1943 at the Council of Resistance, a small armed resistance group. And one of their first assignments was to use their youth, their beauty, and their femininity as a secret weapon. They would dress up nicely, go into bars, seduce high-ranking Nazi officers, lure them into the woods, and kill them. On numerous occasions, they would, also with male members of their group, liquidate, which is only a nice way to say killing, Dutch traitors and Nazis. Countless. They never wanted to reveal the exact number, but there were quite a few. Of course, this was extremely dangerous, so they had to disguise themselves. Truus would dress up as a man, Hannie had to dye her beautiful red hair black and wear glasses made out of window glass. They had to move from one hiding place to another. They had to be incredibly careful. However, time did run out. Hannie was arrested in the spring of 1945 at a routine checkpoint when the Germans discovered illegal newspapers. They had no idea who they had in front of them yet, but soon they discovered her gun in her purse and saw the red roots coming out of her hair. And then they knew this is the girl with the red hair whom they had been after for so long. So Hannie was imprisoned in Amsterdam. She was tortured, she was isolated, and eventually executed by the Nazis on April 17, 1945, not even 3 weeks before the end of the war. Truus and Freddy survived the war, but were traumatized for life. I personally knew Truus and Freddy Overstegen for 20 years. I wrote a high school history paper on Hannie Schaft. I interviewed Truus. Truus told me her story, introduced me to Freddy, asked me to be the keynote speaker at the National Hannie Schaft commemoration and to join the board of their foundation. Truus and Freddy lived long lives until 92, and I had the honor of calling them my friend for all this time. Today, bullying, discrimination, and exclusion still happen on a daily basis. So that is why we have to stand up for each other and remain human, especially under inhuman circumstances. So please read my book, Seducing and Killing Nazis, and listen to the episode of What's Her Name podcast on Truus and Freddy Overstegen, and I wish you a very fruitful event. Thank you very much.
All right, now we go from Amsterdam to Ukraine. It is no secret that the Soviet Union silenced the voices of many artists, but pieces of this history are still emerging, including the remarkable story of Stefania Turkiewicz, Ukraine's first female composer, classical composer, to achieve professional renown. Although Turkiewicz's professional output, symphonies, operas, ballets, chamber music, should have established her as a major international figure, many of her compositions remain unpublished and unheard, even in her own country. Lost Soviet-era voices like Turkiewicz's carry great social and political weight as present-day Ukraine moves beyond a reductive Russian versus European identity against the urgent backdrop of war. And this became the subject of my doctoral research. Tonight I will sing one of Turkiewicz's art songs for soprano and piano entitled Hutzulka. The text is a nostalgic reflection on the mountainous Carpathian region of Ukraine. Turkiewicz had to flee her homeland, Ukraine, for not complying with socialist realism, and she never returned. She actually passed away in Cambridge. You can hear the longing in her music as the text reflects on her abandoned homeland. The sun, like a painted Easter egg, trident mountains, the forest a cradle in a starry wildfire, stone engravings, the Cheremosh River a violin. I carry my indescribable longing into foreign lands.
Сонечко, сонечко, писанко. Горі, горі, тризубаті, горі, тризубаті.
Good evening, everyone. I really wish I could be there today to jump up and down and squeal and with excitement and generally help you celebrate. But since I can't be there, I appreciate this opportunity to tell you a little story. In March 2019, an interesting news item appeared on my morning computer feed. An architectural salvage vendor discovered 75 glass plate photographic negatives in the attic of an old house on Chicago's North Side. They dated from the late 19th century, and for the most part, they were informal pictures of a woman, a small child, and a very large dog. It was an interesting little historical puzzle, so I kept reading. The salvage vendor learned that the little girl's name was Sigrid Schultz. The woman was her mother, Hedwig, and the photographs were taken by her father, Herman, who was a successful portrait painter who had immigrated from Norway in 1892. Then I hit the punchline. Sigrid grew up to be a groundbreaking foreign correspondent and one of the first women to be a foreign bureau chief for a major American newspaper, which was interesting. But here's what makes it a story. Sigrid served as the Chicago Tribune's Berlin bureau chief from 1925 to 1941. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, that means Nazis, right? You're correct. That means Nazis. At a time when few women reporters wrote front-page stories, Sigrid regularly reported on all the major events of the Nazi rise to power and a lot of the minor events, including a rare personal interview with Hitler in 1930. She often scooped her male counterparts on major stories. She found ways to get the news out of Berlin at a time when censorship was tightening and when life was becoming much more dangerous for foreign correspondents. She outwitted the Nazis in Germany. She stood up to pro-Nazi sympathizers back home. And she fought against fake news and propaganda on both sides of the Atlantic. She was one of the first American reporters to tell her readers just how dangerous the Nazis were. She was one of the last American reporters to leave Berlin before it became too late. For the last 4 years, I've watched the rise of Nazi Germany through Sigrid's eyes. And I've often wondered whether I would be as courageous as she was. I hope I never find out. But if the time came, I will try to remember to ask myself, what would Sigrid Schultz have done? Olivia, Katie, congratulations on the new book and on 6 wonderful years of introducing us to the stories of women that we hadn't heard of before. I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Well, we have approached the modern era. We've made it all the way through time and around the world. And landing at the future is now. This is the last couple of paragraphs before the afterword, which Olivia is going to read. Just now, millennials across the world are in the wings, about to step into their hour upon the stage. Sociologists tell us that for the first time ever in the history of the world, this generation has more in common with each other globally than they do with the elderly in their own countries. For the first time, a whole generation has shared values. What are they? Authenticity, equality, tolerance. Millennials want meaningful work to help build something they can believe in. They want people to be able to be themselves without harassment, restriction, or prejudice. They want to celebrate differences, explore the world, and collect experience. Now that's new. Eventually, inevitably, millennials will be sitting in all the seats of power, and the next chapter in the human saga will be like nothing we've ever seen. Representing the future for us tonight is Ella Kasperowitz, the illustrator. She's maybe hiding some. There she is! Yay! Ella illustrated our children's nonfiction called A Stinky History of Toilets. And it was an impossible task, but I also have been following her. I absolutely love her work. Need I say more? She has a table out in the foyer, so we hope we will visit her after tonight. Okay, Olivia with the afterword.
Katie's making me read this because she thinks she's going to cry. So now if I cry, it's her fault. The future is now. What can the lives of these 80 women teach us? That the human saga is almost unfathomably long and achingly beautiful. That none of us are alone in our searing pain and our soaring joy. That there is a reason there's such a fine line between crying and laughing. 100 billion people have played their hour upon the stage, setting up the plot for us. We are this hour of humanity's most incredible creation, our story. If we had chosen a different set of 80 women, the story would be entirely different, with radically new plot points, enlightening in a new way. That's the whole point. There is no one correct history of the world. There is no fixed cast of main characters. Human history is a mine of truths we can return to again and again. Our human story is made up entirely of people who were ragged but hopeful, broken and beautiful, charging the horizon and yearning for home. In other words, they were all exactly like us. There are 8 billion stories going on right now. When you pause to think about all of the lives that have come before, all the souls who have lived and died and passed the baton, your life becomes a little less heavy, a little more beautiful. The stakes aren't as high as you think, but also the impact of your minor character turns out to be profound. And the saga wouldn't be worth singing without the struggles that test the limits of the human spirit. What or where is that limit to the human spirit? We've been searching. 100 billion characters over hundreds of thousands of years. Haven't found it yet. See? She was right. I know. She can never do the end.
I can never read it.
Thank you so much to everybody. I want to say a thank you again, especially to everyone from Michael O'Mara
and to the Vagina Museum. Yes. And to all of you. But honestly, I think the most exciting thing is that there's so much being done out there, all across the world, every time period. The work is actually being done up to 11. It's such an exciting time to be alive. Thank you for coming and checking this out tonight.
Thank you for everyone who came and shared.
Thanks for coming across the world to come and share with us. We love you. 100 million thanks to everyone involved in this project. What's Her Name? A History of the World in 80 Lost Women is out now in the UK, comes out in July in Australia, the audiobook in August, and released in the US in December. Thank you so much to all the team that made this possible. Ross Hamilton, who asked us to write the book, GABBY NEMETH, who helped us finish the book, our publicity team, Millen Brown-Ewens and Saskia Anjanent, Charlie at the Vagina Museum, Dan Sosky, Mark Nelson, and Matthew Mickle, who were boots on the ground during the event, and all of our incredibly generous guests. Sam Henderson, KIRK Stapley, Sister Rita Minahan, Gabrielle Kamei, Aaron Patterson, Zeb Bangash, Waleed Ziad, Ian Mortimer, Jessica Wadley, Janet Collard, Kip Wilson, Nikki Druce, Neela Pekarik, Sophie Poldermans, Erica Glenn, Pam Toller, Monica Walker, and Ella Kasperowitz. If you want to follow up on any of their music, their books, or their projects, you can find links to all of their stuff in the show notes or on our website, what'shernamepodcast.com. Thank you so much, world. Thank you so much, listeners. Thank you so much to all you wonderful humans out there in the big, wide universe.